I mostly read public domain books here on Glenn Reads Books to You, and they were written a long time ago, so they're usually racist, or sexist, or bigoted, but in there somewhere is a story, and that's why those stories are famous. Other times, I read works from independent authors, and they're delightfully not racist, but they might have adult language or adult situations, like, making sex. So that's your warning, but I'm sure you're grown up enough to handle it. Don't write to me complaining. Oh, for God's sake, another one? This happens every time I upload an episode, and oh, God damn it! All right, take a seat, you little idiot. I was just talking about how every time I upload an episode of Treasure Island, Spotify says, "Oh, you got a licensing problem. We think you're doing something illegal." And I have to write back and say, "It's a public domain book. My music is license free. Everything's fine. Can you just put the episode up?" And it takes forever, and they eventually put it up. And then I upload another episode, same thing. Upload another episode, same thing. Upload another episode, they send me the notice. A day goes by, someone writes back, "Ignore that, we're just uploading it." And I'm like, oh, maybe they finally caught on. Upload another one, then they say, you're in breach of it. Spotify's the worst. Why do they bother getting into podcasting? And also their app sucks when you want to listen to any... I'm done. I got nothing else to talk about this week. Welcome to the Glenn Reads Books to You mansion. It's a fun little bit where I pretend to live in a mansion and not just recording in my basement. This is where I read the hottest public domain books and short stories. This week, we're going to keep reading and probably have it taken down on Spotify. Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Want to learn about the author? Oh, I hope so. I took the time to steal this from Wikipedia. Robert Louis Balfour Stevenson was born the 13th of November, 1850, and died the 3rd of December, 1894. He was a Scottish novelist, essayist, poet, and travel writer, best known for the works such as Treasure Island, Strange Case, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, Kidnapped, and A Child's Garden of Verses. He was born and educated in Edinburgh. Stevenson suffered from serious bronchial trouble for much of his life, but continued to write prolifically and travel widely in defiance of his poor health. He settled in Samoa, where, alarmed at the increasing European and American influence at the South Sea Islands, his writing turned to romance and adventure fiction. From that, towards a darker realism. He died of a stroke in his island home in 1894 at the age of 44. Want to hear some fun facts that I stole from mentalfloss.com? Long John Silver was based on a friend of Stevenson's. Like Silver, Stevenson's friend William Henley was tall, energetic, and very charming. Oh, yeah, I also have one leg. The result of a childhood bout with tuberculosis, and after the book's publication, Stevenson came clean to Henley, who was a renowned poet and editor in his own right. Quote, "It was the sight of your maimed strength and masterfulness that begot Long John Silver," unquote. We got time for another one before the grandfather clock goes off. Tell me you shut up. The book pays homage to real pirates and military men. Stevenson references the several real-life pirates, including Blackbeard, William Kidd, and Bartholomew Roberts. Israel Hands, one of Silver's men who dies a bloody death at the hands of Jim Hawkins, was the actual name of Blackbeard's second-in-command. Treasure Island also alludes to British naval officers on the other side of the fight, like Admiral John Benbow, the Benbow Inn, and Admiral Edward Hawke. I don't know why that was so hard for me to read. Why don't we go downstairs and watch me keep trying to read the rest of this book? All right, there you are. Why don't you take a seat? I got shit to do. Let's get through this. Part 5, My Sea Adventure. How my sea adventure began. There was no return of the mutineers, not so much as another shot out of the woods. They had, quote, got their rations for the day, unquote, as the captain put it, and we had the place to ourselves at a quiet time to overhaul the wounded and get dinner. Squire and I cooked outside in spite of the danger, amongst the corpses, and even outside we could hardly tell what we were at, for horror of the loud groans that reached us from the doctor's patients. Out of the 8 men who had fallen in action, only 3 still breathed. One of the pirates who had been shot at the loophole, Hunter and Captain Smollett, and of these the first 2 were as good as dead. The mutineer indeed died under the doctor's knife, and Hunter, do what we could, never recovered. Consciousness, I'm having a tough time today. In this world, he lingered all day, breathing loudly like an old buccaneer at home in his apocalyptic fit, but the bones of his chest had been crushed by the blow, and his skull fractured in falling. And sometime in the following night, without sign or sound, he went to his maker. As for the captain, his wounds were grievous indeed, but not dangerous. No organ was fatally injured. Anderson's ball, for it was Job that shot him first, had broken his shoulder blade and touched the lung. Not badly, but the second half had only torn and displaced some muscles in the calf. He was sure to recover. Burp, the doctor said, but in the meantime, for weeks to come, he must not walk nor move his arm, nor so much as speak when he could help it. My own accidental cut across my knuckles was a flea bite. Dr. Livesey patched it up with plaster and pulled my ears for me into the bargain. After dinner, the squire and the doctor sat by the captain's side a while in consultation, and when they had talked their hearts' content, it being then a little past noon, the doctor took up his hat and pistols, girt on a cutlass, put the chart in his pocket, and with a musket over his shoulder, how much stuff is he carrying with him, crossed the palisade on the north side and set off briskly through the trees. You should leave some guns for the other people back at the base. Gray and I were sitting together at the far end of the blockhouse, to be of our earshot of our officers consulting, and Gray took his pipe out of his mouth and fairly forgot to put it back in again, so thunderstruck was he at the occurrence. "Why, in the name of Davy Jones," said he, "is Dr. Livesey mad?" "Why, no," says I. "He's about the last of the crew for that, I take it." "Well, shipmate," said Gray, "mad he may not be, but if he's not, you mark my words, I am." "I'll take it," I replied. "The doctor has his idea, and if I'm right, he's gonna now go see Ben Gunn." I was right, as he appeared later, but in the meantime, the house was being stifling hot, and the little patch of sand inside the palisade ablaze at the midday sun, and I began to get another thought in my head, which was not by any means so right. What I began to do, was to envy the doctor walking in the cool shadow of the woods with the birds about him, the pleasant smell of the pines, while I sat grilling, with my clothes stuck to the hot resin. And so much blood about me that so many poor dead bodies lying all around that I took a disgust of the place and was almost as strong as fear. All the time I was washing out the blockhouse, and then washing up the things for dinner. This disgusted me kept growing stronger and stronger till at last, being near a bread bag, and with no one observing me, I took the first step towards my escapade and filled both pockets of my coat with a biscuit. I was a fool, if you like, and certainly I was going to do a foolish, overbold act. But I was determined to do it with all the precautions in my power. These biscuits, should anything befall me, would keep me at last from starving till far in on the next day. The next thing I laid hold of was a brace of pistols. He did leave some guns behind for the rest. And as I already had a powder hoard and bullets, I felt myself well supplied with arms. As for the scheme I had in my head, it's not as bad one in itself. I was to go down to the sandy pit that divides the anchorage on the east from the open sea, find the white rock that I observed last evening, and ascertain whether it was there or not that Ben Gunn had hidden his boat. A thing quite worth doing, as I still believe, but I was as certain as I should not be allowed to leave the enclosure. My only plan was to take French leave and slip out. What does French leave mean? Okay, well, whatever. French leave and slip out. When I want to know what that means. When nobody was, I'm going to look it up. I don't think it's actually a thing that the Kindle's going to have. French leave, an unauthorized or unannounced departure, absence without permission. I knew that's what it meant. What does it come from? Said to derive from the French custom of leaving a dinner or ball without saying goodbye to the host. An Irish goodbye. Well, there we go. Just an Irish goodbye, a fancier version, and slip out when nobody was watching. And that was so bad a way of doing it, it was made itself the thing wrong. Oh, but I was only a boy, and I had made my mind up. Well, as things at last fell out, I found an admirable opportunity. Oh, the squire and Gray were busy helping with the captain with his handbags, and the coast was clear. I made a bolt for it over the stockade and into the thickest of the trees, and before my absence was observed, I was out of cry of my companions. Well, this is my second folly, far worse than the first, but as I left, but 2 sound men to guard the house. But like the first, it was a help towards saving all of us. I took my way straight for the east coast of the island, for I determined to go down to the sea, to the side and spit to avoid all chance of observation from the anchorage. Oh, it was already late in the afternoon, although still warm and sunny. As I continued to thread the tall woods, I could hear from far before me not only the continuous thunder of the surf, but a certain tossing of foliage and a grinding of boughs, which showed me the sea breeze had set higher than usual. Soon, cool draughts of air began to reach me, and a few steps farther I came forth into the open borders of the grove and saw the sea lying blue and sunny into the horizon, and the surf tumbling and tossing its foam along the beach. I have never seen the sea quite round Treasure Island. The sun might blaze overhead and the air be without breath, the surface smooth blue, but still these great rollers would be running along all the external coast, thundering and thundering by day and night. Oh, and I scarce believe there is one spot on the island where a man would be out of earshot of their noise. I walked along the surf with great enjoyment, till thinking I was now got far enough to the south, I took the cover of some thick bushes and crept warily up the ridge of the spit. Behind me was the sea. In front of the anchorage, the sea breeze, as though it had been no sooner blown itself out by its usual violence, was already at an end. Oh, it had been succeeded by light, variable airs from the south and the southeast, carrying great banks of fog, and the anchorage under lee of Skeleton Island lay still and laden as when first we entered it. Oh, the Espanola, in an unbroken mirror, was exactly portrayed from the truck in the wartime, the Jolly Roger hanging from her peak. Alongside lay one of the gigs. I was just kind of wondering, the Jolly Roger, do they have to hide that? I mean, these flags are gigantic, that they hang off boats. I know that much. I know nothing about boats, but I know the flags are, like, huge. You can cover a whole house in them, probably. How do you sneak that on the boat? Or does a boat just always have the flag of the country it comes from and also a Jolly Roger in case there's a mutiny? I don't know. That'd be something worth learning. Alongside lay one of the gigs, silver in the stern sheets. Him, I could always recognize. While a couple of men were leaning over the stern bulwarks, one of them with the red cap, the very rogue that I had seen some hours before stride legs upon the palisade. Apparently they were talking and laughing. Though at a distance, upwards of a mile, I could, of course, hear no word of what was said. All at once there began the most horrid, unearthly screaming, which at first startled me badly, though I had soon remembered the voice of Captain Flint, and even though I could make out the bird by her bright plumage as she sat perched upon her master's wrist, soon after the jolly boat shoved off and pulled for shore, and the man with the red cap and his comrade went below by the cabin companion. Just about the same time the sun had gone down behind the spyglass, and as the fog was collecting rapidly, I began to grow dark in earnest. I saw I must lose no time, if I were to find that boat that evening. The white rock, visible enough above the brush, was still some eighth of a mile further down the spit, and it took me a goodish while to get up with it, crawling often on all fours along the scrub. Night had almost come when I had laid my hand on its rough sides. Right below it, there was an exceedingly small hollow of green turf, hidden by the banks and thick underwood about, knee-deep, and that grew there very plentifully, and the center of the dell, sure enough, a little tent of goat skins, like what gypsies carry. Oh, boy, I just said that part out loud. Romani carry, about with them in England. I got caught off guard. I'm not going to go back and re-record this. I accidentally said something bigoted. I dropped into the hollow, lifted the side of the tent, and there was Ben Gunn's boat. Homemade if anything was ever homemade. A rude, lopsided framework of tough wood, and stretched upon that a covering of goat skin with the hair inside. Gross. The thing was extremely small, even for me. Oh, I could hardly imagine that it would have floated with a full-sized man. There was one thwart set as low as possible, a kind of a stretcher in the bows, and a double paddle for propulsion. I had not seen a coracle, such as the ancient Britons made, I guess it's a boat, but I have seen one since. I can give you no fair idea of Ben Gunn's boat than by saying it was like the first and the worst coracle ever made by man. But that great advantage of the coracle it certainly possessed, for it was exceedingly light and portable. Well, now that I had found my boat, you would have thought I had enough of truantry, not looking that up for once, but just truant. But in the meantime, I had taken another notion and become so obstinately fond of it that I would have carried it out. I believe in the teeth of Captain Smollett himself. Weird. That's a weird way of saying that. Do you trust Steve to return your car? I trust the teeth inside Stephen's mouth himself. He was to slip out under the cover of night, cut the Hispaniola adrift, and let her go ashore where she fancied. Wait. In the meantime, I had taken another notion, become so honestly fond of it that I would have carried it out. I believe in the teeth of Captain Smollett himself. This was to... So did Captain Smollett come up with this idea, or did he come up with this idea? Why would you cut the Hispaniola free? Then you got no way to get home. Let her go ashore where she fancied. I had quite made up my mind that the mutineers, after the repulse of the morning, had nothing nearer their hearts than to go up anchor and away to sea. This, I thought, would be a fine thing to prevent, and, then they would go and they would tell people there's people back at that island. And now that I had seen that they left their watchman unprovided with the boat, I thought it might be done with a little risk. Down I sat to wait for darkness, and made a hearty meal of, biscuit. And it was a night out of 10,000 for my purpose. The fog had now buried all heaven. As the last rays of daylight dwindled and disappears, the absolute blackness settled down on Treasure Island. And when at last I shouldered the coracle and groped my way stumbling out to the hollow where I supped, there were but 2 points visible on the whole anchorage. One was a great fire on shore, by which the defeated pirates lay carousing in the swamp. The other, a mere blur of light upon the darkness, indicated the position of the anchored ship. She had swung round to the ebb. Her bow was now toward me. The only lights on board were in the cabin, and what I saw was merely a reflection on the fog of the strong rays that flowed from the stern window. The ebb had already run some time, and I had to wade through the long belt of a swampy sand, where I sank several times above the ankle before I came to the edge of the retreating water. The wading in a little way, with the strength and dexterity, set my coracle keel downwards on the surface. Next chapter, the ebb tide runs. The coracle, who cares? As I had ample reason to know before I was done with her, it was a very safe boat for a person of my height and weight, both buoyant and clever in the seaway, what him or the boat. But, she was the most cross-grained, lopsided craft to manage. Stop pissing on it. It's literally doing what you want it to do. Do as you please, she always made more leeway than anything else, and turning round and round was the maneuver that she was best at. Literally, stop complaining. Even Ben Gunn himself had admitted that she was, quote, queer to handle till you knew her way, unquote. Certainly, I did not know her way. She turned in every direction, but the one I was bound to go. The most part of the time, we were on the broadside on. Burp, I am very sure I never should have made the ship at all, but for the tide. Well, by good fortune, I paddled as I pleased. The tide was still sweeping me down, and there lay the Hispaniola in all caps, right in the fairway, hardly to be missed. First, she loomed before me like a blot of something yet blacker than darkness. Then her spars and hull began to take shape, and the next moment, for as it seemed, for the farther I went, the brisker grew the current of the ebb. I was alongside her, of her hawser. I don't know what any of this stuff means, and I had laid hold. The hawser, I'm looking this up. I'm imagining it's the rope for the anchor. a thick rope or cable for mooring or towing a ship. I got it. Was taut as the bowstring, and the current so strong she pulled upon her anchor. All around the hull in the blackness, the rippling current bubbled and chattered like a little mountain stream. And one cut of my sea gully, and the Hispaniola in all caps would go humming down the tide. So far so good, but next it occurred to my recollection that the taut hawser, suddenly cut, is as dangerous as a kicking horse. 10 to 1 if I were so foolhardy as to cut the Hispaniola in all caps from the anchor, I and the coracle would be knocked clean out of the water. This brought me to a full stop, and if fortune had not yet again particularly favored me, I would have had to abandon my design. But the light airs which had begun blowing from the southeast to the south had hauled round after nightfall into the southwest. Just while I was meditating, a puff came, caught the Hispaniola and forced her up into the current, and to my great joy, I felt the hawser slacken in my grasp. And the hand by which I had held it dipped for a second under the water, and with that I made my mind up, took out my gully and opened it with my teeth, and cut one strand after another till the vessel swung only by 2. Then I lay quiet, waiting to sever these last 2 when the strain would be once more lightened by the breath of wind. All this time I had heard the sound of loud voices from the cabin. But to say the truth, my mind was so entirely taken up with other thoughts that I'd scarcely given an ear. Now, however, when I had nothing else to do, I began to pay more heed. One I recognized for the coxswain, Israel Hands, that had been Flint's gunner in former days. The other was, of course, my friend in the red nightcap. Both men plainly the worse of drink. They were still drinking, for even while I was listening, one of them, with a drunken cry, opened the stern window and threw out something, which I divined to be an empty bottle. But they were not only tipsy, it was plain they were furiously angry. Oaths like hailstones, and every now and then there came forth such an explosion as I thought that they were sure to end in blows. But each time the quarrel passed off, the voices grumbled lower for a while until the next crisis came, and in its turn passed away without result. On shore, I could see the glow of the great campfire burning warmly through the short side trees. Someone was singing a dull old droning sailor song with a droop and a quaver at the very end of the verse. And everything seemingly no end until it but the patience of the singer. I had heard it on the voyage more than once and remembered these words. But one man of her crew alive, what put to sea was 75. And I thought it was a ditty rather too dolefully appropriate for a company that had met such cruel losses in the morning. But indeed, from what I saw, all these buccaneers were callous as the sea they sailed on. At last the breeze came. The schooner sidled and drew near in the dark, and I felt the hawser slacken once more, and with a good, tough effort, cut the last fibers through. The breeze had but little action on the coracle, and I was almost instantly swept against the bows of the Hispaniola, and at the same time the schooner began to turn upon her heel, spinning slowly, end for end across the current. I wrought like a fiend, for I expected every moment to be swamped, and since I found I had not pushed the coracle directly off, I now shoved straight astern. I don't know what any of this stuff means. At length I was clear of my dangerous neighbor, and just as I gave the last impulsion, my hands came across a light cord that was trailing overboard across the stern bulwarks. Instantly, I grasped it. Why should I have done so? I can hardly say. It was at first mere instinct, but once I had it in my hands and found it fast, curiosity began to get the upper hand, and I determined I should have taken one look through the cabin window. So he's going to scurry up this rope in clothes that are supposed to be wet because this little boat, the corpuscle, is kind of got water in it, and he's been sloshed around, and he's got a jacket full of bread. All right, whatever. So he's just going to take him and his soggy bread up and look through a window. I pulled in hand over hand on the cord, and when I judged myself near enough, rose at an infinite risk to about half my height, and thus commanded the roof and a slice of the interior of the cabin. That seems a good enough spot as any to take a little break. talking about wet bread makes me think about damp areas. Why don't we go down to the basement and, I don't know, moisture up a little bit while I let you know about the latest upcoming books from Penguin Random House. Oh, there you are. Every time I invite you down to the basement, I always think, one of these days they're not coming to the basement. But you always come to the basement. You act like it's creepy, but you're always here, aren't you? Why don't you go sit underneath that one naked light bulb by the folding chair while I stand here underneath this naked light bulb and play my guitar for you? Huh? Yes, as I let you know about the latest upcoming book from Penguin Random House, The Titanic Secret, by Clive Cussler and Jack Dubreuil. Part of the An Isaac Bell adventure, category suspense and thriller historical fiction. Want to learn about the Titanic secret? Sure. When Isaac Bell attempts to decipher the forbidden deaths of 9 men, I think there was more than 9 men on the Titanic, he encounters a secret so powerful it could dictate the fate of the world in this riveting thriller by #1 New York Times bestselling author. As I've said in the past, for the last 5 years, if you're a #1 New York Times bestselling author, it doesn't mean anything. It just means your publisher paid money to get you on the list. It's horrible. A century apart, Numa director Dirk Pitt, don't know what Numa is, and Detective Isaac Bell team up to unlock the truth about the most famous maritime disaster of all time. I imagine they're talking about the Titanic. In the present day, Pitt makes a daring rescue from inside an antiquated submersible in the waters off New York City. Oh, his reward afterwards is a document left behind a century earlier by legendary detective Isaac Bell. A document that reopens a historical mystery. ... in 1911 in Colorado, Isaac Bell is asked to look into an unexplained tragedy at a little angel mine in which 9 people died. His dangerous quest to answer the riddle leads to a larger puzzle centered on Byzanium, a rare element with extraordinary powers and a virtually incalculable value. As he discovers that there are people who will do anything to control the substance, Isaac Bell will find out just far he'll go to stop them. What does any of that have to do with the Titanic? They even show the Titanic on the cover. All right, whatever. The Titanic Secret by Clive Cussler and Jack Dubreuil. I guess it takes 2 people to write something that barely involves the Titanic. It's paperback for $14.99, coming out June 4th. You can get it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Bookshop.org, Hudson Booksellers, Powell's, Target, and unfortunately some little kid is going to go into this one store saying, boy, I love history. I'd like to learn more about big historical events. I wonder if anyone can write something for teens at a special value price, as it says as a sticker on the cover, and that I could learn about history. Oh, what's this? Clive Cussler, and in a smaller print, Jack Dubreuil, have written something about the Titanic, and there's a secret. I want to learn because I'm a young, impressionable kid whose parents keep dragging them to Walmart. Boy, is he going to be disappointed. Well, with that, why don't we go back upstairs and continue reading the rest of our pirate book. Aw, you came up already. Sometimes I kind of wish that you found my basement so comfortable that you would choose to stay down there for a while. Then instead of reading to you, I can go on to do whatever crap I was planning on doing tonight. But now you always come back upstairs, you sit here. You ever watch that 70s show? They had a fun basement where they all hang around and smoke weed and hit on each other's sisters. I don't really want to create that environment so much, but I try to take pride. I mean, I got a folding chair and 2 naked light bulbs. It's a growing project. It's going to take time, but I'm trying to make a comfortable little space down there for you. But nope, here you are. Someday, you're going to stay down there, and then I'm going to say, let that little man stay as long as he wants as I fuss about the house, the washing dishes and watering my plants. Okay, anyways, back to the story. By this time, the schooner and her little consort were gliding pretty swiftly through the water. Indeed, we had already fetched up a level of with the campfire. The ship was talking, as sailors say, loudly, treading the innumerable ripples with an incessant, weltering splash, until I got my eye above the windowsill and I could not comprehend why the watchman had taken no alarm. One glance, however, was sufficient, and it was the only one glance that I durst take from an unsteady skiff. It showed me Hans and his companion locked together in deadly wrestle. Yes, each with a hand upon the other's throat. Oh, that's a weird form of wrestling. I dropped upon the thwart again, none too soon, for I was near overboard, and I could see nothing for the moment but these two furious and crimson faces swaying together under the smoky lamp, and I shut my eyes to let them grow once more familiar with the darkness. The endless ballad had come to an end at last, and the whole diminished company about the campfire had broken into the chorus I had heard so often. 15 men on a dead man's chest. Bump, 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 yo ho ho, in a bottle of rum. Bump, bump, drink the devil had done the rest. Bump, 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 yo ho ho, in a bottle of rum. And I was just thinking how busy drink and the devil were at the very moment in the cabin of the Hispaniola. Oh, and I was surprised by a sudden lurch at the coracle. At the same moment, she yawed sharply and seemed to change her course. Oh, the speed in the meantime had strangely increased, and I opened my eyes at once, and all around me were, little ripples. Combing over with the sharp bristling sound of slightly phosphorescent, the Hispaniola herself a few yards, and those whose wake I was still being whirled along seemed to stagger in her course, and I saw her spars toss a little against the blackness of the night. Nay, as I looked longer, I made sure that she was also wheeling to the southward. I glanced over my shoulder, and my heart jumped against my ribs. There, right behind me, was the glow of the campfire. The current had turned at right angles, sweeping around along with it the tall schooner and the little dancing coracle, ever quickening, ever bubbling higher, ever muttering louder. I'm going to stop for a second. The endless ballad. The idea of wrestling being described as a ballad is stuck with me as I continued to read. I would love to be an announcer at a high school wrestling match. This ballad between these two sinewy youths as they clutch at each other's throats. All right, I'll move on. Ever muttering louder, it went spinning through the narrows for the open sea. Suddenly the schooner in front of me gave a violent yaw. Turning perhaps, though 20 degrees, and almost at the same moment one shout followed another from on board. I could hear feet pounding on the companion ladder. Oh, and I knew that the two drunkards had at last been interrupted in their quarrel, their ballad, and awakened to a sense of their disaster. While I lay down flat in the bottom of that wretched skiff and devoutly recommended my spirit to its maker. And at the end of the straits, I made sure that we must fall into some bar of raging breakers where all my troubles would be ended speedily. And though I could perhaps bear to die, I could not bear to look upon my fate as it approached. So I must have lain for hours, continually beaten to and fro by the billows, now and again wetted with flying sprays, and never ceasing to expect death the next plunge. Gradually, weariness grew upon me. A numbness, an occasional stupor, fell upon my mind even in the midst of my terrors, until sleep at last supervened, and in my sea-tossed coracle I lay and dreamed of home, and of the old Admiral Benbow. Well, last chapter of the night, the cruise of the coracle. That was a broad day when I awoke and found myself tossing at the southwest end of Treasure Island. The sun was up and still hid from me behind the great bulk of the spyglass, which on the seaside descended almost to the sea in formidable cliffs. Burp. Hull bowline head. What? Hull, bowline, that's all one word, head, and mizzenmast hill, oh, they're hills, were at my elbow. The hill bare and dark, and the head bound with cliffs 40 or, burp, geez, that was like a hiccup and a burp, 50 feet high and fringed with great masses of fallen rock. Well, it was scarce a quarter of a mile seaward. Oh, and it was my first thought to paddle inland. Oh, but that notion was soon given over. Among the fallen rocks, the breakers sprouted and bellowed. Loud reverberations, heavy sprays flying and falling, succeeded one another from the second to second. And I saw myself, if I ventured near, dashed to death upon the rough shore, or spending my strength in vain to scale the beetling crags. Nor was that all. Oh, for crawling together on the flat tables of rock or letting themselves drop into the sea with loud reports, I beheld huge, slimy monsters, soft snails, as it were, of incredible bigness. What the hell does that mean? 2 or 3 score of them together, making the rocks echo with their barkings. Slimy monsters, soft snails. Like, how big are these snails? Is it really snails, or is he saying that the rocks look like snails? This book is confusing. I have understood since that they were sea lions. Oh, well, that makes more sense. And entirely harmless. Oh, but the look of them, added to the difficulty of the shore and their high running of the surf, was far more than enough to disgust me at that landing place. Yeah, don't go there. The sea lions that you learn later. I mean, fine. Punch a bunch of sea lions and work your way up shore. Whatever, this kid just wants to die. I felt willing, rather, to starve at sea than to confront such perils. In the meantime, I had a better chance, I suppose, before me, north of Haulbowling Head. The land runs a long way, leaving at low tide a long stretch of yellow sand. To the north of that, again, there comes another cape, Cape of the Woods, as it was marked upon the chart, buried in the tall green pines. Which descended into the margins of the sea. I remembered what Silver had said about that current that sets northward along the whole coast of the Treasure Island, and seeing from my position that I was already under its influence, I preferred to leave Bowline Head behind me and reserve my strength for an attempt to land upon the kindler-looking Cape of the Woods. There was a great smooth swell upon the sea. The wind, blowing steady and gentle from the south, well, there was no contrary between that and the current, and the billows rose and fell unbroken. Had it been otherwise, I must long ago have perished, but as it was, it is surprising how easily and securely my little light boat could ride. Often, as I lay still at the bottom and kept no more than an eye above the gunwale, whatever that is, I would see a big blue summit heaving close above me. Yet the coracle could but bounce a little, dance as if on springs, and subside on the other side into the trough, whatever, as lightly as a bird. I began a little to grow very bold, and set up to try my skill at paddling. But even a small change in the disposition of the weight will produce violent changes in the behavior of the oracle, and I had hardly moved before the boat, giving up at once her gentle dancing movement, it ran straight down a slope of water so steep that it made me giddy, and struck her nose with a spout of spray deep into the side of the next wave. Well, I was drenched and terrified and felt instantly back into my old position, whereupon the coracle seemed to find her head again and led me as softly as before among the billows. And it was plain that she was not to be interfered with. And at that rate, since I could in no way influence her course, what hoped I had left of reaching land, I began to be horribly frightened. But I kept my head for all that. First, moving with all care, gradually bailed out the coracle with my sea cap, and then getting my eye once more the gunwale, I set myself to study how it was as she managed to slip so quietly through the rollers. I found each wave, instead of a big, smooth, glossy mountain, it looks from shore, from the vessel deck, as was for all like a range of hills or dry land, or full of peaks and smooth places and valleys. The coracle, left to herself, turning from side to side, threaded, so to speak, by her way through the lower parts and avoided the steep slopes and the higher toppling summits of the wave. Well now, I thought to myself, it is plain I must lie where I am and not disturb the balance. But it is plain that also I can put the paddle over the side from time to time in smooth places and give her a shove, or two, towards land. No sooner thought had been done. There I lay on my elbows in the most trying attitude, and every now and again I gave a weak stroke or two to turn her head to shore. It was very tiring and slow work, yet I did visibly gain ground, and as we drew closer to the Cape of the Woods, though I saw I must infallibly miss that point, I had still made some 100 yards of easting. I was, indeed, close in, and I could see the cool green treetops swaying together in the breeze, and I felt sure that I should make the next promontory without fail. Well, it was high time, for now I began to be tortured with thirst. You didn't think about that when you're stuffing your pockets full of bread. The glow of the sun from above, also he's never mentioned the bread. How soggy is this bread? Its thousandfold reflection from the waves, the seawater that fell and dried upon me, caking my very lips with salt, combined to make my throat burn and my brain ache. The sight of the trees, so near at hand, it almost made me sick with longing. But the current had soon carried me past the point as to reach the next reach of sea opened out. I beheld a sight that changed the nature of my thoughts. Right in front of me, not a half mile away, I beheld the Hispaniola under sail. I made sure, of course, that I should be taken, but I was so distressed for want of water that I scarce knew whether to be glad or sorry at the thought. And long before I had come to the conclusion, surprise had taken entire possession of my mind, and I could do nothing but stare and wonder. The Hispaniola was under her main sail, and two jibs. The beautiful white canvas shone in the sun like snow or silver when I first sighted her. All sails were drawing, and she was lying a course about northwest, and I presumed that the men on board were going round the island on their way back to the anchorage. Presently, she began to fetch more and more to the westward, so that I thought they had sighted me and were going about in chase. At last, however, she fell right into the wind's eye and was taken dead aback, and stood there a while helpless with her sails shivering. Clumsy fellows, said I. They must still be drunk as owls. How drunk do owls get? And I thought how Captain Smollett would have set them skipping. Meanwhile, the schooner gradually fell off and filled again up on another tack, sailed swiftly for a minute or so, and then brought up once more dead in the wind's eye. Again and again this is repeated, to and fro, up and down, north, south, east, and west. The Hispaniola sailed by swoops and dashes, and at each repetition ended as she had begun, with idly flapping canvas. It became plain to me that nobody was steering, and if so, where were the men? Either they were dead drunk or had deserted her, I thought. Why would they desert her? And perhaps if I could get on board, I might return the vessel to her captain. The current was bearing coracle and schooner southward at an equal rate. And as for the latter sailing, it was so wild and intermittent that she hung each time so long in irons that she certainly gained nothing, if she did not even lose. If only I dared to sit up and paddle, I made sure that I would overhaul her. The scheme had an air of adventure that inspired me. Oh, this kid loves adventure. And the thought of the water breaker beside the fore companion doubled up my growing courage. Wow, that one got me. Up I got. Was welcomed and almost instantly by another cloud of spray, but this time stuck to my purpose and set myself, with all my strength and caution, to paddle after the unsteered Hispaniola. Where's he going for the boat? Once I shipped at sea so heavy that I had to stop and bail, with my heart fluttering like a bird. But gradually I got in the way of the thing and guided my coracle among the waves, and only now and then blow upon her bows and a dash of foam in my face. I was down gaining rapidly on the schooner, and I could see the brass glisten on the tiller as it banged about, and still no soul appeared upon her decks. I could not choose but to suppose she was deserted, and if not, the men were lying drunk below, where I might batten them down, perhaps, and do what I chose with the ship. Yeah. Sometimes she had been doing the worst thing possible for me, standing still. She headed nearly due south, yawning, and of course, all the time, each time she fell off, her sails partly filled, and these brought her in a moment right to the wind again. I have said this was the worst thing possible for me, for helpless as she looked in this situation, with the canvas crackling like a cannon and the blocks trundling and banging on her deck, she still continued to run away from me. Not only with the speed of the current, but by the whole amount of her leeway, which was naturally great. But by now at last I had my chance. The breeze fell for some seconds very low, and current gradually returning her, the Hispaniola revolved slowly around her center, and at last presented me her stern, with the cabin window still gaping open, and the lamp over the table still burning into the day. The mainsail hung drooped like a banner. She was stock still but for the current. For the last little while, I had even lost, but now redoubling my efforts, I began once more to overhaul the chase. I kind of wish he would, choose where he's going. He's going to go for the boat, then just get to the boat. This is taking a long time. It is not 100 yards from her when the wind came again in a clap. She filled on the port track and was off again, stooping and skimming, like a swallow. My first impulse was one of despair, but my second was towards joy. Round she came till she was broadside onto me. This is taking forever. Round still until she had covered a half, then and 2/3, then 3/4 of the distance that separated us. Oh, I can see that. I can see the waves boiling white under her forefoot. Immensely tall, she looked to me from my low station on the coracle. Is he going to get on the boat? Then all of a sudden, I began to comprehend. I had scarce time to think, scarce time to act and save myself. I was on the summit of one swell when the schooner came swooping over the next. The bowsprit was over my head, don't know what that is, sprang to my feet and leaped, stamping the coracle under the water. With one hand, I caught the jib boom, don't know what that is, while my foot was lodged between the stay and the brace. I guess he just was able just to grab the ship. And while I still clung there panting, a dull blow told me that the schooner had charged down upon the coracle and that I was left without retreat on the Hispaniola. Well, that's the end of that chapter. Why don't we end it here and go down to the smoking room where perhaps we can have a cigarette and talk about what the hell we just read. Now, there you are. Hurry up, settle down. I got shit to do. You see here on the table is a baboon's skull, and if you take the top of its cranium off, you see it's filled with cigarettes. All sorts of... my wife's birds. All sorts of brands. We've got Lucky Strike, Camel, and Parliament. I know no one smokes anymore, but these are real good cigarettes. So go ahead and have one. After spending the afternoon cleaning up blood and corpses, Jim decides that he's sick of this shit and he wants adventure. So he decides to go out and get Tom Hanks' homemade boat and cut the anchor of the Hispaniola. Why? I don't know. The Hispaniola is their only way home. Even if the pirates take the ship, they will at least say, there's people back there. You can go get them if you want, and maybe someone will come save you. If they don't save you, I don't know, try to take the ship over and then get on it and cut this, whatever. Why? Just don't cut it and let it go out to sea, because then nobody goes home, ever. And the idiots that are on the boat don't know how to sail it, clearly, so they're just going to, drift to sea and die anyways. It's amazing. It's a horrible plan. I don't understand why this is part of the book. Here, we see again the contrast of an ordered people who are back on the island defending themselves from pirates, and the disorder but charm of the pirates themselves. Just when you think the pirates are completely unself-aware, since they are too busy dance wrestling to notice the boat drifting off to sea, they'll suddenly just kind of break out into a sad song about, 15 men or whatever, to show some kind of world-weary awareness of life and their own self-destruction. Jim has his own moment of facing mortality, and we see him be briefly spiritual for the first time, just kind of saying that he's kind of said, okay, God, whatever you want to do. So maybe he's got a little bit of the pirate soul happening to him, maybe, but snaps out of it and manages the situation to stay alive. He gets back on the Hispaniola like an idiot. This might be the first time we see Jim actually deal with consequences for his bizarre need for adventure. Well, with that, thanks for coming around again, and maybe I'll see you next week. Well, it appears you found me in the part of the podcast I hate the most, where I tell you all about the places on the internet where you can find me. You can tell I hate this because of the sound effects making it sound like a stormy night in the drawing room of the damned. Now, there's that. Are you cool? I like cool people, It's the reason why I got involved in this business to begin with, just to meet cool people, not losers. So if you're cool, feel free to go over to my website, nuzzlehouse.com. But if you go there, you get to hear some of the other stuff that I and my wife work on, like the Radio Mystery Theater show, where we try to recreate the same show that used to be on in the 70s, but they don't make any episodes anymore. So we make our own, and we just steal all their commercials. And also, just in the curious mind, we made a Christmas album. If you go to our link tree, you can see that we made a Christmas album. It's the first thing we did after getting married, which I think everyone should do when they get married, is start talking about the Christmas album they're going to make. And we're working on a new show where we give relationship advice by reading paranormal smut. And since I think you might be cool, you can always just email me directly, glenn.nuzzles@gmail.com. But don't email if you're a nerdlinger or a dork. Now, back to business. I can't believe I drank all of them already. There's got to be one left.